Hey guys, welcome to Gary's Ground School. Today we will be talking about human factors and why they are so important when it comes to instrument flights. Also, I will have timestamps in the description, so if there is anything that you already know or you don't really want to hear, this is a rather broad topic, so you can skip through, see what you want to hear, but it's pretty much all the basics. The first part of a safe flight, as we all know, starts on the ground. While weather, airports, and flight planning are definitely important, the most important factor of the flight is the pilot. Most days you might feel great to go fly and manage a high workload, but some days not so much. There's an important acronym that an FAA examiner can actually fail you on. I've had one of my friends who's actually failed on his instrument because he didn't know this acronym, and that of course being IMSAFE, as you see on the screen. Before a flight, you want to evaluate yourself in this order using the IMSAFE acronym. Be prepared for many more acronyms in this video because there are definitely a lot. So as you can see here is the IMSAFE checklist. First thing is illness, like do I have any symptoms of any illnesses, which is a really easy thing to check because for the most part your body's not going to lie to you. The second is medication. So have I been taking medication and do they conflict with the FAA regulations? What are the FAA regulations, you might ask? Over-the-counter medications, this PDF, just search this right here, this phrase, and it should pop up. But this is really nice to print off and have with you in your folder. The next is stress. Stress plays a really, really big factor in how you're feeling before the flight. So just, am I stressed out? Will it affect the flight? And don't be afraid to not go on a flight if you're killed with stress, but 9 times out of 10 you won't be, so it's just a little consideration. Have I been drinking alcohol past 8 to 24 hours? Alcohol, have I been eating properly? And finally, am I emotionally stable? Emotions play a big part in our readiness to fly. Anyways, so that is IMSAFE. Another acronym that is useful in flight is the DECIDE model, right here. Which is a type of aeronautical decision-making process, or ADM. Aeronautical decision-making, that's a common term used, and it's pretty self-explanatory. This is mostly taught for emergencies, but this model can be used to prevent even the possibility of an emergency. One thing, I think I stated it earlier, you want to be ahead of that aircraft and your flight at all times. You want to be proactive, not reactive. So the DECIDE model right here, detect a change needing attention, estimate, choose, identify. You can pause the video, look at this. Very simple. I don't want to take too much of your time. Do something and evaluate. So that is the DECIDE model. All these acronyms you need to know for your exam, so that's why I have them in these videos. While it is definitely beneficial to know, this DECIDE model, there are many hazardous attitudes that a pilot must be aware of because an acronym can only help so much. So the hazardous flight attitudes: anti-authority, impulsivity, you can pause and look at them, invulnerability, macho, and resignation. I honestly think the most important one is invulnerability because there's a lot of times when you look at the weather and you do your basic pre-flight, look at the weather, but in the back of your mind, you're like, I'm not going to be another statistic, crash or whatever. The flight's going to go fine. So invulnerability is the one I find myself struggling with a lot of the times, and I'm trying to be as safe as possible. But once again, crazy, I found another acronym for hazardous flight attitudes, and that is MARI. MAIRI. That's stupid, of course, but it's helped me remember it. So MARI is another acronym you can use. So one way to avoid these problems and hazardous attitudes and whatnot, and especially avoid any sort of emergency, is to know how to effectively perform risk management on all phases of the flight. Risk management, in case you didn't know, is being able to identify and most importantly eliminate hazards in the cockpit before they become, a real problem. The most common acronym to think of regarding risk management is PAVE, as you can see here. So the first thing to evaluate is the pilot, or more specifically yourself. Make sure you are proficient with your training and that you are physically well. Aircraft comes next by determining airworthiness, performance, and proper configuration. Environment, also very important, such as runways, airports, terrain, whatnot, especially weather. Weather is, pilot's best friend or also his worst nightmare. External pressures, So you don't want to be conducting a flight and you're uncomfortable with it, but you're pressured to. A great way to mitigate risk before and during the flight is to be ahead of the aircraft. As stated before, you want to be proactive, not reactive. It is rather easy to let your workload in the cockpit overwhelm you and subsequently make you fall behind the aircraft. It is critical, like I said, keep this in your mind, proactive instead of reactive. You want to be ahead of that airplane because making decisions in an airplane a few seconds too late, but seconds turn into minutes and minutes turn into accidents, which is the main thing we want to avoid. A good way to prevent task saturation and most importantly mistakes from happening is to have a set in stone way of doing things. Yeah, checklists are great, but I honestly like to do my checklist as a do list and to go over my checklist after I have everything done. Let's say I'm coming into land, flaps, power, mixture, landing light, all those things. Brakes are off. I like to do those and then go over my checklist so I can just skim real quickly. Briefings, now this is another set in stone way of doing things, are especially crucial to making sure the flight runs smoothly and gives your passengers or crew a good sense of what is about to happen. A good takeoff briefing usually can be summarized in the safety model, yet another acronym. So you got seatbelts. You want to let your passengers know how to adjust their seatbelts and whatnot. You got your air, more specifically, air vents, how to control them, where they're located. One thing a lot of people look over is fire extinguisher. Now you're like, oh, fire extinguisher's right there, but if you have an engine fire and you have smoke everywhere and you don't know where the fire extinguisher is, that's a lot of, taking your mental ability to go look for that fire extinguisher when you can barely see anything and you got to keep your aircraft under control. It can be really stressful, but if you go over where the fire extinguisher is and how to use it, a lot of that can be avoided. The next is equipment. More importantly, more people say emergency, because you're supposed to know where your equipment is for the emergency, how to use your doors, how to open and latch your doors, things like that. Just really discuss what to do in emergency. Most importantly, what if your engine fails on takeoff? You want to let your crew know how to do that. Traffic and talking, which is really crucial to a brief because it is great to have everyone on the same page as to what the aircraft is about to do. The more people who know what's going on with the flight, the better. And the last is your questions. Just say, hey, anyone confused on anything? Is everyone good with that? Because sometimes, I forget a lot of things a lot of the time. So asking that, I've had many times where my passenger, someone who never flew before, asked me something that saved my tail. That was one situation, but it's really good to get other people's opinions. While all of these are important concepts to memorize, arguably the most important factor in instrument flight are your bodily senses. Your senses do a great job at lying to your brain in instrument flight conditions, and it is very important to rely on your instruments instead of your bodily senses. There are two main senses that lead to spatial disorientation, those being your kinesthetic and vestibular sense. In short, your kinesthetic sense is simply your body's ability to maintain posture with most of its information coming from the compression and tension of the muscles in your body. While your kinesthetic sense, is important, the sense that most commonly causes spatial disorientation is your vestibular sense, or more specifically, your vestibular system. How this system basically works is by using 3 tubes, as you can see on the screen here, that are filled with fluid to relay information about your body's movement in relation to the area around you. These 3 tubes tell your brain if it is pitching, rolling, or yawing like an aircraft, but they are, of course, prone to mistakes. For example, the fluid in these tubes tends to settle, causing your brain to think you are in straight and level flight when really you could be spiraling towards the ground. That is why it is necessary to rely on your instruments instead of your senses. There are, of course, dangers when relying, on your vestibular system, such as, if you look here, the ones you really got to know are the leans, Coriolis illusion, graveyard spin, graveyard spiral. So let's go through them. The leans, more or less, let's say you're turning left, your fluid's going to settle, Like if you're doing a gradual turn to the left, your fluid's going to settle, causing you to feel like you're straight and level when really you're turning left. And so then you turn right because your instrument's saying that you're level, and like conflicting messages between your system and your instrument, which is mainly what all these illusions are, just conflicts between what your instrument's saying and what you are thinking is happening. So you have the Coriolis illusion. So this can be really summarized. Let's say I dropped a pencil, classic case. I go down to pick it up, have my head down, and then I abruptly turn my head up. All those fluids are going to start moving, which is really bad for your vestibular system. You know, all these fluids will start moving around, causing your brain to not know what's happening. And I was like pitch black, flying south of Georgia one time, and you know, I was private pilot, but it was a night flight, and I dropped my pencil, I pick it up, and I look up, and I honestly felt like I was upside down. It was the weirdest, most overwhelming illusion, but I knew about it, and I relied on my instruments. You got the graveyard spin. More specifically, the graveyard spiral is where, let's say, kind of like the leans, I was to turn to the left, and my vestibular system would settle to the left, and then I'd like eventually be pitching down, which causes this motion right here. You got the cinematographic illusion, the inversion illusion, and the elevator illusion. One that really sticks out is the cinematographic illusion. Like jets do this. It's not necessarily like if you're flying a Piper, you're going to feel this, but when you're taking off and when you're accelerating, your body's going to be pushed back into the seat, also causing your fluids to make you feel like you're in a pitch up attitude, even when you're straight and level, and you could pitch down, and that's not good because the runway and ground is below you. Inversion illusion is, let's say you're in a climb and then you push the nose over. That apparently makes you feel like you're tumbling backwards. I've never had that feeling in flight, but then again, I've never been in IMC and in a climb, you know. The last one we have is elevator illusion, which is an abrupt upward vertical acceleration, as can occur in an aircraft, that can stimulate. And I didn't go over the otolith organs. Look at this page right here. Near this, like I've read through all this just to make sure it had facts, but it's really short, precise, simple, and it has all of the factors that go into your vestibular system. It is very interesting to read. I really do recommend that if you really want to understand. But yeah, let's get back to the types of illusions. Elevator illusion, which we just went over. So those are the types of illusions. But the next main human factor concept is none other than your boy hypoxia. Hypoxia generally means the lack of oxygen to the brain and can be particularly dangerous because the symptoms of hypoxia are normally hard to detect before they cause like a change in the flight. Let's say your reaction's delayed like really bad because of hypoxia, but you don't really know because you got that euphoric feeling, you know? There's also, before we go over the types of hypoxia, there's something called time of useful consciousness. It relates to hypoxic hypoxia, which is the lack of oxygen absorbed by the body due to atmospheric conditions. So the higher you go, the less dense and less air pressure you're going to have, and your body's not going to be able to have enough air because let's say you're at 18,000 feet, and as you can see, Earth loses 50% of its atmospheric pressure. That's going to be half the oxygen going into your lungs that your lungs can absorb. And as you go higher, it exponentially gets less. So let's say at 20,000 feet, your cabin depressurizes and you don't have supplemental oxygen. You're like, okay, 30 minutes, I can do that. But if you're at 45,000 feet, that's pretty much barely enough time to grab your supplemental oxygen. Like this is really dangerous. And there's been a few cases. One famous golfer died in 1999 because the plane depressurized. The pilots literally had no time before their brains just quit on them because of the lack of oxygen to effectively descend and get to a better altitude, or to even put on their oxygen mask. It's just crazy. So the types of hypoxia are hypoxic, which like I said is due to altitude, hypemic, which is just think of like smoking a cigarette, carbon monoxide poisoning. Also you got to be aware of a lot of planes, how the heat works, like in the wintertime, is there's a heating shroud around the exhaust. The exhaust heats up the air and shoots it into your cabin, but if there's a leak in that heating shroud, that's going to cause carbon monoxide to come in your cabin. That's not good. A lot of cabins or cockpits have a little carbon monoxide little tab that like changes color if there's carbon monoxide poisoning, but that is very important Because like I said, you can't really tell when the effects of hypoxia are coming or not, and you could be spiraling towards the ground and feel like you're chilling, you know, because your brain is just like schwacked. You also have stagnant hypoxia, which is deficiency in the body due to poor circulation of the blood. So your blood literally cannot, like when you have your arm cut off, like when your arm falls asleep, that is a great example of stagnant hypoxia. Or if you're pulling high Gs, that's why airshow pilots have to wear G suits, because when they pull high Gs, that circulation is being cut off due to gravity. You also have histotoxic hypoxia, which is pretty much just alcohol. You know, that's why you feel so euphoric. And I've heard that being like incredibly drunk near being blacked out is the same as like being at 40,000 feet, because you can't really tell what's going on. But you know, I can't really test that because I can't fly that high. But yeah, that is hypoxia. And finally, the last thing I'm going to add is your supplemental oxygen requirements. I'm trying to make this video where it's just like what you need to know for the test and the oral and the written and whatnot. With supplemental oxygen, if your plane is not pressurized, let's say you're flying a high altitude like Piper Seminole. I don't know if they're pressurized, but I'm willing to bet they're not. You have to have supplemental oxygen, like those masks you'll see people put on. For the pilot, at or below 12,500 feet, no oxygen required. So from between 12,500 feet to 14,000 feet, after 30 minutes at that altitude, the crew has to be provided with supplemental oxygen. Above 14,000 feet, the flight crew, as you can see down here, has to wear supplemental oxygen per the FAR regulations found in your FAR AIM. And then with passengers at or above 15,000 feet, your passengers have to be provided supplemental oxygen, but the thing is, they don't have to use it, which is fine and all, but really, the FAA recommends that you use supplemental oxygen above 8,000 feet, and especially at night, because at night it's a lot more demanding with your eyes and what you have to see and what you have to perceive. So yeah, those are your supplemental oxygen requirements. Know that. That'll be great. But anyways, that's all I have for the video and for human factors. So if I left out anything or messed up, which I bet I did, please comment it. I'll pin it. I'll, make sure everyone can see it and put some corrections in the video. But yeah, thanks for watching.